Good day, everyone. Would like to welcome you all and thank you for joining the Overcoming Barriers to Climate Smart Rise, Exploring Locally Relevant Implementation Options webinar. So we will just start the webinar and then people can join as we go. My name is Sitla Boyo and I'm the project manager for the African Climate Action Partnership. And I will be facilitating today's conversation around overcoming barriers to climate smart rise, exploring locally relevant implementation options. So just to give like a backstory or background, this webinar is draws on insights from a working paper on climate smart rise practices that were developed by the AfCAP Rise Community Core Group, as well as like recent discussions within the RISE community of practice on how we can translate global practices into locally viable solutions. And the central questions for us mostly was how can countries identify relevant practices and what options exist for those that cannot adapt any standard practices. So that's what the webinar will be about today. And thank you for taking the time. So what I'm going to do just to kick off things, I will quickly go through the agenda, go through the overview. While I do that, could you please introduce yourself in the chat box? Tell us where you are, where you join, where you're joining from. So yeah, on the agenda today, we'll have an overview of AfCAP as well as the RISE Committee of Practice. And then that will be followed by our presentations. The first presentation will be by Abdel on bridging the implementation gap, making climate smart rice work for African farmers. And then that will be followed by our presenter, Abubakar, who will be presenting on understanding barriers to adapting climate smart techniques. And then the last person who will be closing off the presentation will be from Endo, and she'll be speaking on locally relevant mitigation options. And then right after that, we'll have our Q&A, our Q&A questions. So if you have any questions, feel free to maybe, if you can't hold the question to yourself, feel free to drop it in the chat box, or you can just wait and you can ask your questions during the Q&A session. And then all questions will be addressed during that time once we've done all our presentations. And then after our Q&A, it will be followed by the plenary discussion. And then we just have like key insights that what came out from the plenary discussion, and then that will be our closing. So I'll just start off with the overview of AfCAP, who we are and what we do. So the African Climate Action Partnership, which is AfCAP in short, is a global climate action partnership. It falls under the umbrella of the Global Climate Action Partnership, the Africa Regional Partnership. It is a network for peer learning, technical collaboration, and information exchange. We support the implementation of ambitious led strategies as well as the nationally determined contributions. We are a country-driven, demand-driven approach to help build practitioner capacity. So within the AfCAP, next slide, please. Within the AfCAP community of practice, we have different communities of practice. So we have, the first one is the AMG-COP, which is the Africa Mini-Grids Community of Practice. And the aim under this community of practice, it is to support key network of stakeholder in creating an enabling environment for mini-grid deployment across Africa. And then we also have the livestock community of practice, and the aim under this one is to enhance capacities for the design and implementation of long-term, low-emission, climate-resilient development pathways in the livestock sector across Africa. Then the third community of practice, it is the soil organic carbon community of practice. And under this community of practice, we raise ambition in the presentation of SOC or soil organic carbon targets in future and NDCs and LTS of African countries. So the last community of practice, and the reason why we gathered here, we gathered under this community of practice, which is the RISE community of practice. which the aim here is to support low emission and climate resilient paddy rice production in Africa. Also having a collaborative network for key players to interact and share learnings. Next slide, please. So about the community of practice itself, which is the rice community of practice, the mission under this community of practice, it is to facilitate greater collaboration between key stakeholders, institutions, and countries in the rice sector to promote low emission and climate smart rice resilient rice production across the continent. Next slide, please. And the objective, it is to promote knowledge sharing and peer-to-peer exchanges among key stakeholders, programs, as well as national institution in the rice sector. We also encourage and support the African climate action champions and best practices in the rice sector. And the last objective is to support capacity development for the design and the implementation of low emission and climate resilient rice production in Africa. And the progress that we've done so far within this community of practice, we've organized a design workshop, which was virtual. We supported a rice sector expert to participating in the LT-LEDs training and Africa Climate Week. We've also organized a webinar on exploring collaborative pathways. We've organized an in-person event in collaboration with APRLG and SRI 2030. And we have also, there's an establishment of an expert panel to support learning, support planning. And we've also organized an Anglophone regional rice forum in Kenya, which was in 2024. We've launched the call for funding for baseline emission data collection, which was also in 2024. We've organized a parallel session at the GCAP global event in Brazil, which was last year. We have also co-hosted a Francophone regional forum with Africa Rice in Cote d'Ivoire early this year, I think in Feb. And then we've also sponsored researchers to attend training in the Philippines on GHG emissions in rice systems, which was this year. We have also organized and convened a rice technical exchange between TARI and key delegates from Kenya, Liberia, and Morogoro, Tanzania this year. The last one, we have organized a rice institutional exchange between Africa Rice and our rice seed funding recipient Institute for Agricultural Research. So with that being said, that will then lead us to the next part of our webinar today, which is the keynote presentations. And the first one, it will be on bridging the implementation gap. That will be done by Abdel. Thank you so much, Abdel. The floor is yours. And yes. Abdel, just a quick one. I don't think your mic is working. We can't hear you, but we can see that you're speaking. Okay.
You can hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Oh, excellent. Sorry about that. I don't know what really happened. Can you go to the next slide, please? So I really want to give you an overview first of what I want to share with you, or what they call starting with the end in mind. Basically, if you want to reach farmers with any technology that can help them really to improve their productivity and sustain it, we have to deliver a good product. And that is the most important thing at the beginning. So we have to make sure that you have varieties um, develop that are climate smart and are marketable. Marketable means they meet the consumer and farmer needs and also deliver them faster. We also have to look at the complementary management options, mainly tailored to improve productivity, to improve the quality and resilience to climate change. And also, we definitely have to have effective delivery system to be able to deliver both the seeds of these varieties as well as any innovative technologies and knowledge and faster. That's the most important because of the climate change is really changing very fast and we need new innovations almost every 5 years. Please, next. The second important thing is also you have to support the farmers with sustaining their productivity and reducing the risk. So there is some risk aversion strategies that is being implemented in other countries, especially in Asia, including crop insurance. Diverse farming system is very helpful in case one crop failed, the other one will work. And also effective market linkages for input and output. This is very important because most of our farmers in Africa actually are not getting what they should get from their production. There's lots of intermediaries and broken value chains that need to be fixed, especially at the policy level. And also we need effective warning and monitoring systems that can help both the government to monitor their food production and also for farmers to monitor if they need to adjust seasons or if they need to skip a season, for example, or go for the next. So this is very important now. So we need a good geospatial and GIS system as well as a system that can link the information both to policymakers and farmers. Please, next. And the last one is policies. Policies cut across all of those. So we need to have really effective policies, both at the national and regional level to fast track adoption and impact of these. I will mention some of these as we go along. And we need also policies at the regional and continental levels if we really want self-sufficiency and we now want food sovereignty to be sustained in the continent. And that is mainly because of the risks now we have in the international trade market. And we have seen that countries that have money, but they cannot buy food under certain crises, like what happened during the Ukraine war, what happened during 2007, 2008 food crisis, and so on. Next, please. So for breeding, we really have done a lot, and we have developed varieties that work well under drought, under salinity, under flooding, with change in disease, pressure, and type of diseases, and so on. But our approach has always been integrating one or the other. The actual field condition is quite different. Farmers can have drought at the beginning of the season and then flooding later in the season, and salinity can happen anytime, especially with the intrusion of sea level and especially with drought where salinity comes to the surface. So farmers need solutions that can tackle all of those at the same time. Diseases are changing with climate change and could strike any time during the season. So now we are thinking of, actually we started already planning and changing our breeding strategy. If you go to next slide, I'll just take the example of flooding. If you look, these are the types of flooding which actually occur in the field. So it could happen during seeding when where farmers are using direct seeding. Just about 5 centimeters of water could completely destroy the seeds and they cannot germinate. And this involve a very different mechanisms where we have now tolerant material that can germinate underwater where they shut down the normal aerobic system and they start new mechanisms where they can mobilize starch and carbohydrates. And the seeds still can germinate underwater. Flash floods is very common to us, where the water level could be between 20 to 100 centimeters for about 2 to 3 weeks maximum. And again, we have solution to this through sub-1 right now, and we have new genes coming in the pipeline where the plant actually shut down whenever it is flooded and stay green, protect its carbohydrates as well as it is greenness. And once the water goes down, the plant start growing. So we have very good mechanism hold of this one, and we have so many varieties that were released. The third and common one is stagnant flooding, which could occur after complete flooding, or it could occur just on its own. And this is when the water level is about 20 to 60 to 70 centimeters, but it stayed at that level for months. And the plant have to grow, stay above water, and be able to produce sufficient leaves and sufficient branches and have reasonable yield. In this, we need plants that can elongate by not more than 1 to 2.5 centimeters per day. If it elongates too fast, it will lodge in water. And if it elongates too slow, it will be submerged. The last one, which is now common only in specific areas, is deep water and floating rice. And this is when the plant just grow with water. This, in some cases, this can be by about 5 to 15 centimeters per day, or 20, even 25 centimeters per day, based on the rate at which the water goes up. The last three are the most important for us because deep water rice is very specialized, and now we are trying to integrate tolerance of these three together with tolerance of drought and others. And next slide will show how we are having a new approach to do that. Sorry, this is a bit crowded, but basically now, go back, yeah. Basically now we are changing our breeding strategy. First of all is to find donors for all these traits and for multiple donors for a specific trait, because if each trait normally have different genes, and then we intercross these donors to produce F1s, and these F1s now go through a cycle of advancement, but with selection for the genes that we know of through marker-assisted selection or through genomic selection. And then we advance the material through what we call speed breeding, where you can have 5 generations, sometimes 6 generations per year, very fast. And once you reach F6, you can start testing these in different ecologies and different location in farmer fields, and also integrate data that we have to select the top genotypes. Especially, you can also use genomic estimated values that we will be able to generate from the data that we generate at the beginning. This material form what we call donor elite lines, or you can call it bridge material. And this bridge material now, it's a continuous cycle. We'll continue producing these, and they will be available continuously. Whenever you need to breed for a specific location or a specific variety type or quality type, you can cross this material with that variety and do the same cycle, and then again use all the information that you have in the past until you have elite flood brooding material that can be tested finally in the field and released with farmers. So you see the testing now moved from just testing for individual traits to testing materials that combine all the traits that we are interested in by putting it into natural actual farmer fields. Next, please. So after we have these varieties, we need to have a good delivery system, especially this system. Next. And this is what we have this system now. We have different models, but this is the main elements of the system that we are using. Once we have a variety that we started testing it in farmer field, even before release, we have to make sure that the farmers are really aware of these varieties. And that is why all the testing is done directly by farmers based on the demand and also the choices that are available for farmers so they can make their own choices. And most importantly is to have a very efficient partnership. Selectively, we have the partners that we need. Government support is very important. We work with private sector. Extremely important right now to increase the involvement of private sector in at all our steps of delivery, and also with farmer communities, farmer groups, youth and women entrepreneurships. And those has to be really trained. So their capacity have to improve. The basic focus or intention for this model is basically to have farmers could have accessibility, they can afford the seeds, and the system will be sustained where they can have the seeds when they need them continuously. For example, if they select a variety, that variety should be continuous until it is phased out of the system. And we have to also be aware of gender and youth and women, young women and young men inclusion in this system, because now they are taking major roles as entrepreneurs. Next, please. And also we have to make sure that the seed production and processing facilities is the place, and all the partners are well trained from preparation of the nursery, following all the regulation and standards until harvesting of the seeds. And we have to look at where the bottlenecks are. Drying always is a challenge, so we make sure that they have options for that. I'm just showing here one is a flat bed dryer. Now it started deploying in few countries in Africa. Seed dressing is really a bottleneck because most of the seed producers do it manually, where they need about 9 to 10 people to do 1 ton per day. Just a small machine like this can help them do 40 ton using one person only. And also storage of the seeds is extremely important. Next, please. So we also have to integrate delivery mechanisms that are faster, especially the new apps that are available. I'm showing here one app now we are using. We deployed it in Tanzania, and now we are deploying it in Kenya, Malawi, and Mozambique. It's a very efficient app where the farmers can be able to know where the seeds are available, how can they access it, what varieties are suitable for their areas, quality of the seeds, what are the best seeds available in the market, and most importantly, how they maintain, how the vendors that can maintain continuous support for them. This app actually is quite efficient now. Even the governments are using it now to have a database of their farmers and make sure that they know which varieties are moving faster and focus more on them. So this is also all these digital tools are becoming extremely important as part of the system, delivery system. Next, please. Yeah, there is also innovative technologies that we need to use, and I will just show a few examples. I'm sure Abu Bakr and Andy will also talk about this. I'll go quickly over them. Next, please. One most exciting and important thing for us is shifting from transplanting to direct seeding. And that has many advantages, saving labor, saving water, reducing cost, and shortening the season. And that is very important also with climate change. And you can mechanize it. And that really save a lot of resources. You can mechanize both direct dry seeding and wet seeding. We talked about this before. Next. I think I have 10 minutes, so I will hurry. And also we have talked before about how we can effectively manage water, like alternative wetting and drying, mid-season water withdrawal, and other mechanisms that can help reduce water use so that you can save it for the season, because now water becomes so precious, but at the same time it has some other advantages where you can reduce greenhouse gas emission, you can produce healthier system where you can reduce the breeding cycles of mosquitoes, for example, reduce the uptake of heavy metals. So it has so many advantages beside contribution to climate change mitigation and adaptation at the same time. Next, please. The most important part is really how can we reach farmers with these climate smart technologies. Next, please. So the technologies are there, they're all tested and known. And unfortunately for us in Africa, we are the most vulnerable part of the world, actually. If anything happened due to climate change or due to global crisis or price shocks in the international market, you find Africa is the first to be affected. So we need to develop cutting edge technologies for faster product development and delivery. I have shown some example of that. We really have to replace our varieties quickly. With climate change now, I will say 5 years is probably the maximum, is good, the optimum. 10 years probably should be the maximum. We have varieties that are more than almost 60 years old or older still being in the market. Those are not helpful to the farmers. They are really deteriorated under climate change and become sensitive to all kinds of diseases and pests. We need some national and regional commitments from the governments. And this is, unfortunately, it is not happening in Africa. It is happening a lot in other parts of the world, especially in Asia, where the farmers are really supported and backed up. This is mainly to deliver climate resilient varieties, to ensure food security, to ensure market access. All of this requires certain policies and investment from governments. And again, governments in Africa are not investing much into agriculture, as you all know. Most countries are investing less than 1%. So this is one thing that AfCAP can really work on and try to encourage countries to actually prioritize investment and commitment to agriculture. We need to support de-risking smallholder farmers. This is again happening elsewhere in the world. And actually that is one of the elements that led to most countries in Asia to be self-sufficient and to be now to have a surplus for export. Look, for example, an India example where it used to be in deficit just 20 years ago, now it is the largest exporter of rice in the world because of these policies. Private sector role is extremely important. There has to be policies and supporting guidelines from governments and from us to really encourage them and make sure that they are in the really empowered and supported to take their role into the whole value chain, especially for supporting seeds, supporting agrochemicals, and so on. And also we need better forecasting systems. This is the area where we're really ignoring in Africa. Apps are very important. Most of them are quite useful for us. Using modeling, using techniques like AI, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and so on. We have plenty of information that is available right now that can help us to forecast what is coming next, and that information should be available to governments as well as to farmers. Next is my last slide, please. So also, we have to focus on national and regional policies beyond the field, uh, uh, especially for trade stability and market resilience. And again, I see this is one of the main elements that help Asia to be at least self-sufficient or reach sovereignty in their food supply. We have to maintain strategic buffer stocks. For Africa, this is important both at the national level and at the regional level. And that is mainly because what we learned from previous shocks. So that is, again, it is a standard process in some countries. China and India are leading in this, Vietnam and others all have sufficient stock that can allow them to really bridge a period when there is disasters and so on. We have to think of that. We have to have flexible tariff adjustments to sponsor or to respond to price fluctuations. In Africa, as you see, in most of the cases, when there is a scarcity, the taxes also goes up, and things become just more difficult. Reduce non-tariff barriers. Many countries are putting that mainly either to control the market or for political reasons. I think with all the agreement that we have throughout different countries, neighboring countries, different regions, and across the continent, we should be able to really resolve these issues so we can respond quickly and respond with products that can really help small holder farmers. Regional trade agreements are, most of them are in place, but are not really being implemented. These are very useful for the movement of grains when there is scarcity due to climate change in some part of the continent, when there is shortage of seeds, when there is shortage of knowledge, or where there is knowledge that can be helpful across the continent. We are now moving with one agreement, we call it Seed Without Border, where all countries ratify this agreement should be able to access all varieties developed by other countries across Asia and Africa. And we are hoping that this will be an example where this kind of simple policy change can be extremely helpful. I think this is my last one. Next. So thank you so much. Back to you, Sally. I think you are muted.
Sorry about that. Thank you so much, Abdel, for that informative presentation. And like the fact that how you we spoke on how we can bridge the gap, the strategies that we can use, even like the digital tools are becoming part of the system, which is a good thing. So we are missing one of our presenters, but so we'll just jump straight into the third presenter, which is Endo, and she'll be speaking on locally relevant mitigation options that we have. Take it away, Endo.
Great. So can you hear me well?
Very
Hello.
good. Yes,
Great.
yes.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much, Celia, and thank you for having me, everyone. It's a good day. I am Andora Danielson. I think it's my really pleasure to be here and to participate in this webinar on challenge and scaling opportunities for climate smart agriculture. And for the matter of that topic, my talk today will be mostly talking about tailoring and targeting low emission rice system. Abdel has quite provided an overview, and I think some of the thing that I'm sharing will be certainly the same things. Next slides, please. So I will have an overview of 3 main points today. There'll be more on why low emission system and what are low emission system, and as well what are tools that we have in the optimizations of this system that may help us to address some of the barriers, and as well identify opportunities for scaling. And my talk will certainly withdraw from my experience in Southeast Asia, but as we have quite time for interactions and discussions after the presentations, I hope we can continue the further these different topics, so we can explore more how this can be applied and what this means as well for the African context. So next slides, please. So low emission systems are very much focused on the role of rice system that is currently feeding more than half of the world populations. And certainly that's why we have a specific community of practice for rice. Rice is using globally around 10% of the world arable crop land. And as our populations is continuously growing by 2030, rice areas won't increase that much, but the demand for the crop will increase, and we will need to account for the need of additional 135 million people. Next slides, please. So fortunately, and I think, I don't know if I can say fortunately or unfortunately, but I think it's fortunately, most of these needs may come from Africa. But Africa as well is the only region, as you can see here in these tables, where we may have opportunities to increase rice areas for productions. So in the rest of the world, Asia, the Middle East, we will have, in Latin America, we will have reductions of the arable land for productions by 2050. But where in Africa, we will have an opportunity for increasing arable land for productions. And for us, all informations for rice areas in particular, it will be distributed along different agro environments, because rice can grow under different systems. As Abdel shared earlier, we can think about the deep water rice that will be on low-lying areas, some system that will be rain-fed and growing without waters in upland areas, and then you will have intermediate systems of irrigated system, which will be benefiting access to water, but at the same time as well, maybe able to adapt to environment where we don't have water. But most of more than 50% of the total rice produced in the world is from the irrigated system. And as we expand rice production in Africa, we will certainly as well will focus some of the initiatives towards this irrigated system. One other challenge, next slides, please, is that these irrigated systems are mainly managed intensively, and the intensifications of the systems poses some kind of a threat as well for the environment, because It's among the main source of non-CO2 emission, as you can see here in this graph on the bar on the left here, where if we are looking into the agricultural sector, rice is the third, just after livestock and croplands, all in combination. But if we're looking just into methane emission itself, rice will become the second largest emissions. And like as I mentioned, these emissions are driving force, causing climate change, which is threatening farmers' livelihood. And we have example of that just here with all of these extreme events that's more and more frequent. And this is really a big challenges for global food security, but as well for our planet sustainability. So next slides, please. So what are we going to define as low emission systems? And I think when we talk about low emission systems and the topic of our webinar today, it's very much well aligned, because the way how we define climate smart agriculture is as well the way how we define low emission system, because it has the same features that will be based on climate variability adaptations, and as well the optimizations of different combinations of practice that will aim to reduce environmental footprint, but increase of productivity. But for low emissions in particular, you'll have this focus on where one of the criteria will be the reductions of emissions. And for rice, it will be mainly for methane. So in my line of work, this means notifications and recommendations of solutions that will first of all, certainly, and I think everyone will agree on this as based off Abdel's introduction earlier, no technology will be of interest for farmers if it's not increasing their yield. And for the case of low emissions, as we progress towards these solutions, maintaining yield is a kind of a non-negotiable criteria. We're looking as well into improving resources efficiency, mainly water and nitrogen. And then as well, looking into a more broader impact in terms of soil health. And in rice in particular, the definition of soil health is still a big question, because it will change based on the agri-environment of target that we're talking about. And then so different meta-analysis that's been conducted by IRI, including the improvement of water management, straw management, improved variety within particularly short duration variety, will meet these criteria, or well, yields are increased, resource efficiency are increased, but then the emissions is decreasing. And if we assume an additive effect of this, we may aim for 65% of emission reduction. So next slides, please. So if we break down a bit, however, some of this, we can identify further benefits on some of the practice, but as well some challenges. So I think it's very nice that I came after Abdal, because it's kind of a continuity of all the things that he has mentioned. So one of these practice will be the shift from transplanted rice to direct seeded rice. That shift is mainly driven by adaptations to labor scarcity, and as well water use, water availability that's been reduced. So by shifting the conventional practice of transplanted rice to direct seeded rice, we aim to reduce the use of labor and water up to 30%. But direct seeded rice as well is a technology that's been really recognized for climate risk adaptation. And one of its advantage as well is that it's enabled the adoptions of different management practice, such as reduced water management use. And that practice may lead as well to methane reductions by 25%. So direct seeded rice is certainly one of the flagship technologies that can drive low emission system and overall climate smart agriculture's in rice system. But the main challenge is accessibility and affordability, and mainly it's because direct seeded rice induce an unintended effect where farmers has to manage differently the weed control, and at the same time as well for efficiency, because one of the aim is labor use, mechanizations becomes really one of the key that make these technologies advancing and fast impact. But when we have an environment where mechanizations need being implemented before, it requires an environment where we have entrepreneurship, as Abdel mentioned earlier, that aim to ensure that we have availability of equipment for its implementation, but this equipment as well has to come up with some certain level of affordability, but as well a certain level of support, so then the equipment will be sustained in time. So one of the main constraints for direct-seeded rice is the benefits is proven, but this additional unintended effect that needs to be managed through with control and mainly facilitated through mechanizations requires a different business models for different options in the areas where direct-seeded rice will be implemented. Next slides, please. If we look into straw management in particular, so one of the main drivers of emissions in rice system is the decomposition of soil organic carbon in the soil under anaerobic conditions. So the less organic carbon we have in the soil, the lower is the potential of a system to go for emission. But at the same time, straw as well play a significant role into the soil organic carbon storage of the system, so mainly in terms of sequestrations. And I think we have as well another COP with the AfCAP on that, and I think there can be some linkage there. But for straw management, the recommendations will be to provide an alternative against burning mainly, but as well certainly incorporation. So we can propose different solutions in terms of incorporations, because by removal, we can have reductions of emissions by 50%. And by playing on the timing for incorporations, we can have around 10%. So in straw, the main barrier is the requirement of a behavioral change from the farmers. Burning is easy and fast. Leaving the straw in the field as well is easy, although it has some unintended effect. But then the farmers is invited to add additional process in its harvesting process to remove the straw. And that straw being removed should be attached to a certain and value. So we have different research looking into the reuse of this straw. But because we have so much amount of straw produced in the rice, most of this reuse that we have are not as addressing at scale the main challenge of straw management. But one option that we may think of is biochar in particular, because by removal the straw, we can aim to produce straw from biochar, bringing back that straw to the system, and that can be very much positive for low input systems, but as well for the systems where we have soil constraints, because biochar is very key and it's been proven to improve soil fertility. So in terms of that behavior change straw requires as well an additional solutions to demonstrate and secure an economic viability of its processing. And biochar comes into that picture because we can value biochar through carbon credit, through soil carbon sequestration, but as well through some impact of biochar in terms of reductions of inputs use, because we have increased of productivity of the system. But as well in our research recently, but I'm not presenting the result here, is we have as well some effect of a biochar in reducing absolute emissions in the system. So in terms of straw management, these are some of the challenge. And even if I'm saying I'm going to share with you some of the examples of experience that we have here in Southeast Asia, this remains a challenge as well here, where we still have large rice areas that's still burning rice straw, and where as well rice straw doesn't have any alternative usage. Next slides, please. And I think for these solutions here, you must be all familiar with, because when we talk about low emission rice system, we logically and naturally will think about a change in water management, particularly the use of alternate wetting and drying. So it's, I think, the only one clean development mechanism that is recognized in rice as of today, which means that the shift from continuous flooded to AWD is a practice that's been recognized to reduce emissions, and different rice projects can rely on this one to generate additional benefits for the farmers in the adoptions of AWD. So the concept is very simple. Instead of leaving water stagnant in the soil, in the field, from sowing to 2 weeks before harvesting, we introduce some period of drying in the system based on the water dynamic, and there is a triggers that will be inviting for irrigations, and that trigger has to protect the crop and not push the crop growth towards some stressing conditions. So for AWD adoptions, the objective is really reductions of water use, and then reductions of methane, but the yield has to be conserved. And that's one of a challenge in the adoptions of AWD, because under different practice and different management, AWD may lead to certain yield loss ranging up to 10%. But even 10%, statistically, we may say in the science world that, okay, it's not significant, no difference. But for farmers, 10% is very significant. And that's one of a challenge in the adoptions of AWD, because it's so sensitive. And so skills are required, and as well, really commitment in its implementation. One of the solutions that we have is that we have a tool to map stability of AWD, and that's a very important one, because if a technology is disseminated or targeted in areas where it's not suitable, it's sure that farmers will face more challenges than the regular challenge expected from the technology itself. The other thing, it's same as in straw management. The implementations of AWD is deviating from the conventional process in rice productions of farmers, because the farmers now has to monitor its field for water, allow its field to dry, which is not something that they used to implement. This change required some additional benefit to the farmers, because, like as I mentioned, we're not seeing really yield increase if a system is very much well optimized. And then so the form of incentive that exists is the carbon credit that's coming, but as well, there is a significant effort right now to try to document and communicate properly all the different co-benefits that AWD can have. So among these, for example, is resistance to lodging, as well resistance to water deficit when it has. I think AWD plants has a better root growth, and that's really conferred to the system, better resistance to lodging, like as I mentioned earlier, and broader access as well to water within the soil profile. So next slides, please. One of our main tools for ensuring that AWD is reaching to the right areas of targets is the climate stability mapping for AWD. And this has to account for the cropping calendar, has to account for different biophysical factors, including soil properties, climate patterns, but as well the locations of a field within a topo sequence, that it will be a field and upstream or downstream. And we have already a kind of an available models that everyone can use and can apply to identify really where AWD can be suitable. Next slides, please. The other solution that we can think of as well is having all of these technologies coming together. And then that is much more promising, because there is certainly maybe a better gain there in terms of yield, and so the engagement of farmers will be as well more easier. But these different technologies, when they integrated together, they will have a different response and different trade-offs that needs to be considered. And then we're still very much at an early stage to really be able to quantify and as well targeting these integrated solutions. But one thing as well that is a little bit behind in that sense is the policy, like as Abdel mentioned. So low emission systems open farmers access to a benefit through carbon credit, but the systems that's required to be in place for farmers to claim this credit is not yet always available. and that's like the monitoring, reporting, and verification system. The only MRV and methodology available is only covering for AWD, and for all the integrated system to be in one place, they still need the required accumulations of a lot of science-based evidence of their effect, but as well implementations of methodology on how to monitor them and how to report them. But monitoring and reporting and verification system is key to ensure that any efforts in farmers' practice change can be recognized, and it's as well the basis of any development of incentive scheme for farmers to adopt this practice. Next slides, please. So as I'm talking about MRV, I think this is bringing me to as well my last point in terms of like, okay, what is really needed that may help us to move forward and to address some of the key barriers that I shared earlier. So one of them is data. Data can hold key solutions to some of the barriers in climate-smart agricultural adaptations, but as well disseminations, and for low emissions as well. And particularly for that, it's because data can help to inform the development of decision-making tools. Abdel has mentioned that, and mainly a decision-making tool that help us for optimizing nutrient management, for instance, identifying optimum planting date. And so decision supporting tool can be as much as powerful, as much as the quality and the amount of data that's been used in their development. And what you have here is an example of schematic on how data from different sources can be integrated. And I do believe as we are expanding and as we have this community of practice for rice in Africa, we may be in a good positions to really think about how can we bring together our data as part of our activity in the COP to really develop a robust data intelligence system for rice for the continent that will have relevance at regional levels, but as well at national levels and going down to farmers for impact. Because with a decision-making tool that's so well-informed, we can run scenario analysis, and we can attach this into some visualization platforms that will help capacity building, but as well enhance our capacity to fast adopt and tailor any new technologies that's coming in as it comes from different sources. And like Abdel mentioned, for example, we need to adapt variety within 5 years. So if there is new variety from breeding today, we need to know where these varieties will go straight away and fast. Well, we don't need anymore to run 2 or 3 years of trials to identify what will be their genotype and environment interaction. Next slide, Phil. The same thing as well, thinking about developing a monitoring and reporting and verification system for Africa and for low emissions. In general, we can follow the same approach. Well, in that instance, it's not about decision-making tool, but about a flow of data that will help us to quantify the greenhouse gas for baseline and where we're at. And when we adopt new technologies, what will be the gain, and inform strategically greenhouse gas inventory, but as well national deductions contribution plan. And I do believe our platforms here today may certainly be key in implementing that and moving forward on that. Next slides, please. So I think I will stop here, but if I just have to kind of summarize a bit what I want to share in my talk is that low emission system is almost the same as climate smart agricultural practice. It's key for sustainability and climate resilience. And I think as the world population is growing fast, it's as well putting rice as a key to support climate goal globally, but as well the transition to net zero at national, regionals, and global level. There are still gaps in the formulations of low emission systems, and among them are the understanding of the different interactions of practice, and mainly with environmental factors. But I see that as we move forward and have more and more research implemented in that, we will be able to tailor and target adequately low emission system to maximize their benefits, but as well to minimize unintended effects. Open knowledge sharing and cross-country experience certainly may accelerate adaptations to context-specific conditions, and I'm looking forward that our discussion today will lead to that. And I think for the continent in general, data access remain challenging, but I think it's a first step to address some of the barriers to large-scaling objectives, and particularly as well if we aim low-emission system not only just for reductions of emissions, but as well for climate resilience. So thank you again for having me and looking forward to discussion today. Next
Thank
slide,
you
please.
for that detailed and informative presentation. I also like the linkage that you shown in your presentation between you and what Abdul spoke about earlier on. I see we have a couple of questions for you, but we'll reserve that for later on. We have our last speaker, Abubakar, who managed to join. So Abubakar, do you mind just getting ready to present? And Abubakar will be speaking on the understanding barriers to adapting climate smart techniques. So if you're able to, we'll share from our side, Abubakar, don't worry about that. So you can just unmute and take it away.
Okay. Thank you, Sile, and thank you, Ando, for that wonderful presentation. As you can see from the slides, I'm to present understanding barriers to adopting climate smart, but we are going to be focusing on Nigerian climate aspects. So next slide, please. Yeah. So good morning, good afternoon. Though it's morning here, afternoon in some places. We are going to delve into the critical issues and that intersect food security, economic development, and environmental sustainability in Nigeria, climate smart agriculture. Now, this is going to be our roadmap for the session. We'll start by setting the stage, then defining our key concept. Then we explore some specific techniques that are being adopted in Nigeria currently as the climate smart agricultural techniques. Then we identify the major hurdles. And then finally, we discuss the pathways forward. So next slide, please. Yeah, Nigerian agriculture is on the front line of climate crisis, where smallholders that are the backbone of farmers in Nigeria face unprecedented challenges, as you can see from a changing climate, directly threatening the livelihoods and national food security. You can see that in all parts of the country, they have one share of problem of the climate smart agriculture, ranging from the north, the south, the nationwide atlas, where in the north we are facing desertification, we are facing problem of drought, erratic rainfall, and in the south we are facing the coastal flooding. And this is as a result of human activity that are causing this. Like in the country where about 35% of the workforce constitute the farming community, and then it constitutes about 22% of the GDP. So any problem as a result of climate crisis is going to affect this large population, 35% of the workforce, and then 22% of the GDP. As you can see that over 80% of the farmers of the population of Nigeria are into farming activity. So these climate crises are going to affect this whole population. Now, to achieve food security for a projected 400 million people by 2050, then there is need to adopt these climate smart agricultural practices. So let's go to the next slide. So these are the major targets why people practice climate smart agriculture in Nigeria for long-term increase in agricultural productivity, adaptation, and resilience to climate change, and then to lower the greenhouse gas emission. Now, you can see that climate smart is not a single technology, but it's a combination of a whole package, but holistic, that needs to be approached in a holistic manner. Simultaneously pursue these three goals of producing more food, strengthening our farms against climate shock, and then where feasible helping to fight the root cause of the problem. So now let's look at some of the techniques that are being adopted. Farmers are adopting them as a result of the problem they are facing. So let's go to the next slide, please. So these are some of the techniques that people are using. Minimum tillage in order to reduce erosion. A lot of research has shown that about 25% of labor is being reduced as people practice minimum tillage, because it's difficult also to encourage people to adopt this technique, whereby people are used to the whole conventional techniques of disturbing the soil, practicing the plowing, the harrowing, and everything. But by the time you come, you don't have to come directly and tell them that this is a climate technique, but you have to come in a form of telling them the incentives of practicing this that is going to solve about 25%, because labor cost is very high here in Nigeria. So if we come through this approach that adopting this kind of conservation practices is going to save about 25% of their income, and then farmers are adopting. Though at the initial stage, they will be skeptical, but as you continue time to time, they get to. So a lot of research has shown about 25% of the workforce labor cost in terms of financial spending is being cut down as farmers are encouraged to practice this. And then the issue of crop rotation also, people are finding it difficult, especially with the respect to fertilizer application and the menace of pest and disease. So the only thing you can come is to encourage the farmers to be practicing crop rotation, whereby, because majority of the people are into cereal crop production. So getting them to start switching to other crops that are beneficial, that is regenerative agriculture, is very difficult. So, but people are getting used to, with the help of some of the research output from the research station, the higher institution, people are adopting this technology. And then another aspect that people are into now is the issue of water management. The climatic conditions is becoming very severe, where we're having a lot of drought. Where people used to have excess of water, now people are experiencing a drought. Where people are experiencing drought before, people are now experiencing flooding. So you see, you have to now start thinking of how to come in. Now, other techniques that people are being advocated to adopt is this drip irrigation. Though at the first instance, it seems like a joke presenting this kind of technology to the farmer. But with time, when you start with the farmer school and what have you, demonstration farms, then people get to see the benefit. Things like, I can remember introducing the alternate wetting and drying. It was a great task for people to adopt the technology, because the farmers are used to seeing water always in their field when they are practicing rice. And then you come in to tell them that the water is not there anymore, but you can adopt this, and the farmer will be skeptical. But with time, people are getting to adopt this thing, to the extent that people are even now practicing rainwater harvesting and all other techniques we can we can lay our hands on. Can we move to the next slide, the next climate smart technology? Yeah, agroforestry. Before, people are not into this agroforestry, they are solely into arable crop production. But with time, we try to introduce the concept of agroforestry to farmers, where they are practicing this Federa albida, Pacea biglobosa, to the extent that some people are even practicing fruit trees like pawpaw, whereby are going to be combined with the crops. The crops are in between, and then you have the rows of the trees, and then in between you have the arable crop production. So it's a kind of initially it was like not adopted, But because of the challenges people are facing, it says that now people are having a kind of year-round activity. They can harvest from the fruit trees, and then they can also harvest from the crops they are using, and they will start advocating for the use of stress tolerance crop varieties. Before, the farmers are used to recycling their seeds. Getting them to buy certified seed is like a kind of monopoly. People are, anything that will make the farmer to remove money from his pocket is becoming a kind of difficulty. But with the advent of these climate vulnerability, people are getting to adopt to the use of certified seeds, where we have seeds like the Faro 44, we have the Nerica, that's for the rice varieties. We have the Faro 56, IJS 02, and the rest. Now people begin to see the need to adopt these certified seeds, and the kind of gain they tend to have. And then the issue of irrigation. Most people depend on the petrol, the diesel pumping machines for irrigating their land, because the dams are shrinking due to political reasons. The dams are not taken care of. The dams that had been constructed for like 100, no, like 40 to 60 years are abandoned. So people are now left with their own choices. That's building tube wells, building irrigation canals by themselves. So now the issue of petrol, gas is becoming a problem. So now people are now turning to solar power to power their pumping machine in order to have irrigation into their farms. So let's go to the next slides. The next slide, please. Now, this table is showing some of the climate smart agricultural practices, their impacts, and then the literatures where you can have the impacts from here. You can see the drought tolerant maize, about 20 to 30%, yield advantage, conservation tillage about 25 to 40%, soil moisturization, 30% labor cost reduction, and then solar pump irrigation, reduce greenhouse gas emission. So let's go to the next slides. Now, you can see that herein lies the paradox we are going to see. We have the tools that we shown, we have the evidence that is there documented in the literature, but widespread adoption remains very elusive. So understanding why is the first step to solving this problem. Now, the critical question is that if these techniques are so beneficial, why aren't more farmers using them? So let's look at the barriers now. Let's move to the next slide, please. Now you can see that we try to group the barriers into like 3 clusters. We have one, the socio-economic and financial impacts of the farmers, then the knowledge and institutional problems, and then we have also the problem of policy and infrastructure. So now in terms of the first cluster, which is the socio-economic, now it boils down to lack of capital and secure rights. A farmer who cannot get a loan because loan is becoming difficult. The farmers have to use their meager resources to start farming activities. Now getting access to loan for a sustainable farming is becoming a problem, whereby only 5% of the smallholder farmers have access. We have about 80% of the population are into agriculture, but only about 5%. And even these 5% that are having access to credit facility, they are at the exorbitant price, maybe up to like 13% interest. So a lot of farmers are finding it difficult to access this. Then another problem here is the land tenure system, because most of the farmers don't own farm. They only get a lease farm, even if those that have the family farms. So in terms of inheritance, all the farmers are being divided. So you end up seeing that year in, year out, the land is being fragmented, because when you have a family of 5 and then they inherit like 5 hectares, so when it is time for inheritance sharing, so the land is shared into 5 equal parts. You can see, so land, so every family whole is having 1 hectare of land. And then with time, that 1 hectare of land is also divided into the children of, so somebody may end up having 0.25 hectares of land. So instead of increasing the agricultural activities end up being shrinking. And then also the gender disparity. You can see that women constitute the larger workforce of the farming practices, but they are not getting enough as they should get because of the cultural barrier and what have you. So let's move to the next barrier. That is the knowledge and institution. We know that knowledge is power, but it is not reaching everywhere. Our extension system is overstretched. You can see that the ratio of extension agent here in the country is about 1 to 10,000 extension farmers, as against the 1 to 800 recommended by the FAO. Even these extension workers, they are not being updated from time to time. Even where there are extension workers, you see that the extension workers belong to like some companies, not government-owned extension agent, but the companies that are agro-allied companies that want to sell their products. So they end up recruiting the extension workers, and then the extension workers, they also, of course, they tend to focus on the products of the company that employs them. So instead of having a wide range of consultations with the farmers, no, the extension workers are limited to the product of their employers. And the few ones that are employed by the government are not much. So those are the ones that you get. Sometimes they get some training, but not as they also get into training. And then another one is poor access to information. Like I said, most of the farmers are located in the rural areas. So getting access to information regarding the weather situation of the country, the calendar, is difficult. And the extension workers that are supposed to take the information of the year activity is they are limited. And then weak research farmer linkages. Even the research institution, though they have their extension agents, but there are not many. So we find out that there are a lot of technology, climate smart technology and older breeding technology, but to take it to the farmers and then to receive farmers feedback is becoming a problem. Though those research institutes try as much as possible to be conducting some seminars, some symposium, but you see that the outreach is not as it is expected. So this is another problem. So let's go to the last one. The last barrier. Let's go to the next slide, please. Key, there's the policy and infrastructure. You see that now, even if the farmer has the money, the knowledge, but they operate within a broader system. So you have problems like policy incoherence, people subsidy, the government will come with kind of subsidize input in order to ease the farmers' problems. But you see that these, instead of it to reach the real farmers, but because of political reasons, they are used as political tool, not everything gets to the farmers. Or even if they are going to get to the farmers, they don't get in time. You can imagine input being brought when the farmer is about to harvest his products. So it's not going to be of any use. It's just like administering medicine to a dead person, right? And then even when the farmers manage to produce with the meager resources they have, another thing is post-harvest lost, and then poor access. You see that people are having difficulty from bringing out their product from where they are produced, because most of these things are produced in a remote area. Now transporting it to the urban area where people get to consume now is becoming difficult, and then unpredictable input supply. Sometimes when the farmers are even ready, you find out the inputs are not even available in the market. So it's becoming a problem. Then even when they produce, you see that the market is not there for them to even sell their products. So now these are some of the barriers that boils down to adoption of even climate smart agriculture. You see, there is the problem with climate, and it is affecting the farm activities. So now there is need to take the technologies, but taking the technologies and adopting it, now these are some of the problems that we are encountering here in the country. So let's move to the next slide, please. So now what are the possible solutions that we are thinking towards in mitigating this cluster of problems? Now, the financial architecture now has to be redesigned in such a way that the are tailored toward financial products, just like index insurance, credit guarantees, and then it should be expanded to reach even the farmers in the remote area. And then knowledge and capacity building. We have to revive our extension services. We have to get more extension workers that will reach all the nooks and crannies. You can imagine one extension workers to almost 8,000 farmers. How is he going to cover, and how long is he going to take to even take the new resources? So we have to increase our extension services. And then sometimes we have to even support farmers to farmers. So sometimes what we do in the research institute, in the university, is that we get some farmers that will serve like as lead farmers in a community. So we train them, we equip them with some equipment, and then we encourage them to go and scale down the training that they have. Now, doing that is going to ensure that it reduces the kind of barrier of the extension workers to, so it's going to be a kind of peer-to-peer learning, whereby the training is stepped down to the local farmers, and then the local farmers step it to their community and what have you. So these are some of the techniques that we are using. So let's move to the next slide, please. Now, another one on the policy and institutional reform is that we are trying to see that we have pushed the mainstreaming of these climate smart agricultural practices to be inculcated into our policies. And then we are trying to invest critically in the rural infrastructure. That is, we are encouraging the policy makers to see if they are going to increase their budgetary allocation towards having these facilities for the rural farmers. And then another thing that we are also preaching is gender smart and inclusive program, whereby in all the programs we are trying to see that the gender equity is maintained, right from the training, from the incentives, from all what have you. We are trying to see, because based on the cultural, what will I say, the cultural something that you see that the activities in real time is all inclusive. But in terms of dominance, you see that the male gender are dominating, but we are trying to see that we are bringing other genders also into it, not only the male, but also even the youths, because the are designed here in the country. You see that the youth are shying away from agricultural activities, but we are trying to, whatever programs we are having, to incorporate even the youth also into the programs. So the next, please. Next slides. Next slides. Next slides. So in conclusion, now the path to climate smart agricultural future for Nigeria is clear. We have what the challenges are, and we have some of the suggested way forwards. So by working together, we can break these barriers and we can empower our farmers not to just survive, but to thrive in the face of climate challenges. So now I leave you with these simple takeaways. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Abubakar, for that informative and detailed presentation on climate smart techniques in Nigeria. And it was great to see how you broke down all the areas, like how you grouped them. That was amazing. So if now we come to the end of all our presentations, and if you have any questions, please feel free to maybe raise your hand or to just pop the question into the chat box. But we do have a few questions already. So I'll start by the first question that we got. And I'm thinking this question was for Endo. The first question was by Narayana, who asked, did you try map scientifically the areas or regions or countries where DSR can be adopted successfully? So I'm not sure if Narayana, you want to unmute and speak, or it's fine if we read the questions from the chat box. But yeah, I believe that question was for Endo. So you can go ahead, Endo, and unmute and answer the question.
Yeah, I provided some start of answers in the chat as well, but I think in terms of suitability of direct seeded rice, the biophysical factors of it may be not limiting, but it's more the social context, like as I mentioned earlier, on the challenge of direct seeded rice. In terms of a mapping tool for rice areas with direct seeded rice, we have some reliable remote sensing technologies that can do that. But in terms of suitability, like as I mentioned earlier, the differentiations between transplanted rice and direct seeded rice shift may not be really based on some biophysical factors, but mostly on a socioeconomic context and as well technological context. So an example of that is an area can easily shift to direct seeded rice if you are set up to accompany properly all the required technologies. So for doing direct seeded rice, for instance, you have to make sure that you level your land. So that's one technology that needs to be done. So laser leveling is one example of that. And then you have to use the right varieties. So there are now new technologies in terms of improved variety that's kind of really targeted for direct seeded rice. You have as well to account for integrated weed management as well. So that's for me, I think the really main challenges than the suitability per se of direct seeded rice versus different crop establishment. But I think we have a different answers in here. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. You don't need to change it. You don't need to change which land to use, because if you've seen different areas can do direct seeded rice, you can do direct seeded rice in lowland system. It's not a it's another biophysical constraint.
Right. Thank you so much, Ando, for that. Nairan, feel free to raise your hand and just unmute if you have any more follow-up questions. Are there any more questions, or anyone has their hand up to ask a question or would like to ask a question? Okay. I see. Okay. Do you want to unmute? I mean, to just ask the question to Endo, Winnie.
Excuse me, can I ask a question?
Sure, go ahead. Then Winnie, you can ask after Sunny.
Hello.
Yes, you can.
Thank you for your nice presentation. I appreciate the presenters. I have some few questions, one of which is on the alternate wetting and drying. Based on my field experience, I learned that alternate wetting and drying is easily practiced in areas of upland, and the production, the practice is perfectly undertaken under upland rice production, as I said earlier. But I noticed that farmers in wetland areas where you have shallow water table, they experience much of difficulties practicing alternate wetting and drying. And even if they try to practice it, you will see that the uh, effect of the alternate wetting and drying is not as prominent as that in the upland. So it means that there is, some labor difficulties involved, and I don't know. So my question is there any way that we can optimize or enhance practicing alternate wetting and drying in wetland areas? This is the first question. The second is based on my, uh, let's say, long years of interaction with the farmers, particularly in Nigeria and some part of Africa as well. I noticed that there is a lack of consistency in terms of adoption of climate smart practices. For instance, when you interview a farmer or you have a conversation, he may tell you that, of course, he has been exposed to different climate smart agricultural technologies, or he has been trained on that by different organizations, maybe by different institutions. But then along the way, you will see that they are still not practicing those techniques and technologies they were trained on by different institutions. So this is of course a great gap that we have to work hard to make sure that we bridge the gap. What are the reasons of the lack of sustainable adoption of those technologies by our rural farmers? Another gap that I want us to shed more light on is variety option. We in the course of discussion, one of the presenters mentioned, part of the ways of reducing greenhouse gas emission is about what do you call it, the duration of the crop in the field, short-term crop, long-term crop. Of course, the long-term will generate more emission. So and when you go to our farmers, like even last week I was in an area of rice production, you will see that they practice, they plant different varieties. One is, some are long, some are short. How do we push to make sure that they adopt or they restrict themselves to planting short-term varieties, so that will automatically cut down the greenhouse gas effect? So these are some of my questions and or concern. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sunny. I can answer the AWD answer first, and probably I will let Abdul and Abubakar to address the issues of farmers' interaction. maybe there is a kind of like confusions of terminology, and I apologize if I'm not familiar with, but what do you call as upland rice? Because for me, upland rice is a systems where the field are not having any stagnant water, where wetland rice, that will be more under low-lying areas and more prone of having stagnant water sitting on the field. So normally AWD is recommended for system that is wetland rice. And then so if you don't have a systems of drainage, definitely it will be hard to implement AWD. But in most irrigated systems where AWD is targeted, you have that opportunity. So AWD is optimized and recommended for irrigated system where farmers have control on its water. That's a premise. We cannot recommend AWD for rain-fed system. It's only for irrigated system. So in rain-fed systems, you may have situations where you can have AWD because the rains didn't come, but that's like naturally implementation of AWD. That's just a normal dynamic of a system, and probably maybe that's what you define by upland. So again, apologies if I have some confusions in terms of terminology. But just to clarify for everyone, alternate wetting and drying is a water-saving technology. It's for irrigated system. So if your system is not irrigated, AWD is not the technology. Of course, you can do mid-season drainage, multiple drainage, which is certainly the same as AWD, but the AWD technology is targeted for irrigated system.
Okay, I can add to the second two questions, and Abubakar, probably you can add more if I miss anything. The lack of consistency in adoption of climate smart technologies. Farmers are trained, exposed, but they are not adopting. I mentioned at the beginning of my presentation, and I stressed the point of having a product that is attractive to farmers. So I think just by telling the farmers this is good for climate change adaptation without really showing a real benefit for it, it is very difficult for them to apply that. You know, farmers are really commercial. The best commercial people are farmers. And what they are adapted to, they want to stick to it. So you have to show them an alternative. So I think in most of the time, our training just come out just telling and going, and we have to really start. I also outlined that in my presentation. If you want farmers to adapt something, take them with you from the time of understanding their needs all the way to delivering a product. They should be always with you. And from the time you have something stable, test it in the field and let the farmers be familiar with what you have. But I think just telling the farmers this is good for you and this will work and reduce greenhouse gas emission, that's not going to work. And another thing, farmers do not see benefit of climate change mitigation, for example, but they see benefit of adaptation. Products that can increase their production and can increase their income. So this is also something we have to put in mind, and that's why this carbon credit, carbon market, and all ideas came on to really incentivize farmers to be able to adapt these technologies. So bottom line is, if you really need the farmers to adapt the new ideas, engage them from the beginning and let them own the technologies that really going to solve their problem. So once it is released, they are happy to adapt it and at the same time support its adoption by their neighbors and so on. This is actually from my experience, from what I have seen, is technology that you start testing with farmers from the beginning and engage them from the beginning, it always make a huge difference. And that's what we did with restaurant varieties, drought, flooding, and others, all of them from the time we have the first elite lines, all the tests should be done in the field. And it's not stress tolerance alone. It is actually so many traits. Market traits are extremely important. What the farmers prefer for their own food is extremely important, and what they want to sell also is very important. So we have to collect this information. That's why we always go ahead with our what we call the market intelligence people who will really do a lot of interviews to understand what are the need, and then we design products based on that. Variety options. This is actually an kind of a risk aversion process. We know it is traditional farmers a lot, that they always tend to grow different varieties with different lengths and different yields. Could be low yielding, but it's stress tolerant. They still keep a small part of their farm for that. Basically, they can't know what is going to happen next. So this is an old tradition, and the farmers in some places are still sticking to it. And the third question, I think variety options, decreasing greenhouse gas emission. I made that comment actually. Having shorter duration varieties will help. In the past, we have the perception that if you shorten the duration of varieties beyond the specific time, you reduce yield. But I think that linkage was broken now. We have seen many varieties in Asia, for example, where farmers are growing 100, 110 days varieties and getting quite reasonable yield. And sometimes they go even for shorter, like in Vietnam, they go to 85-day varieties, but they can grow, they can have 3 seasons per year irrigated areas. So their yield can jump to 15 to 17 tons per hectare per year. So there is options for that. But I think to do that also, you need to expose farmers to these new varieties, let them really select them by themselves during the time of development. And then I think that adoption will follow. It's important to have short maturing, medium maturing, and long maturing varieties based on the season. Especially in flood-prone areas, sometimes you need really long duration varieties so that they can start heading when the water starts receding. Otherwise, they will not produce any grains. In some areas where you have drought, if it is a bimodal drought, if it is a one-time drought, so all of this really dictate which varieties will be grown by farmers. Farmers just by their experience, just grow a mix of varieties so that they can minimize their risk. Okay, I don't know if Abu Bakr, you want to add more to any of these points?
I think Abdulbaki, you have said a lot. Just like you said, in terms of advising the farmers, in terms of greenhouse gas emission, like you don't have to come directly, because the farmers, not all of them are aware of the greenhouse gases, though they are aware of the climate change effect. Just like you say, it has to be indirectly. You know, the language the farmers understand is increase in income, right?
Yeah.
So you have to tell them that it's going to reduce the cost of irrigating their farms, it's going to reduce the cost of labor, and then it's going to increase the farm, and then the yield is also sometimes increase. So that is the language the farmers use. So you are addressing their issue of income. At the end, at the background, you are also addressing the issue of greenhouse gas emission by adopting the climate smart agriculture. Just like he was saying, the issue of direct seeded, in terms of like here in Nigeria, most of the people that practice this the dry seeded in the upland region. But when you advocate that, they will complain to you the issue of weeds, herbicides, right? The herbicides are expensive, and then the weeds are too much. And then because weeding manually, most of the farmers use weed manually. So, and is the one of the most expensive. But like I said, you have to explain the trade-offs of adopting the direct seeded, the income you are going to get compared to the what they are going to spend. So when you are going to the farmers, you go to them like indirectly, understand their thinking, and then you explain the technology in that manner. So at the end of the day, you have the win-win situation. So that's my own contribution. Yeah.
Thank you so much for all the answers and the collaboration on giving and giving feedback on the questions. But unfortunately, we've come to the end of our webinar today. We're running out of time. We've actually ran over our time. So we have to wrap it up. So I would like to say thank you all for joining us today and joining the conversation on exploring the locally relevant options. And hopefully having these dialogue, the conversations will strengthen the awareness of the local adaptable climate smart rice options that are out there. But other than that, thank you so much for the good conversation. And yeah, I think that's where we're gonna end. And also I'd like to thank you all our speakers for availing themselves. Really appreciate it. And yes, thank you to everyone. We will be in touch in terms of comms and sending out communications from the community of practice. And we look forward to working with you guys more in the future. Thank you all.